Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Season 1, Episode 8 of Blade. So, this episode goes back to Stephen Razor and also focuses on a Blade focused episode. Yeah, there is some things going on with Krista. Yeah, there is some stuff going on with Marcus Van Sciver's house. But most of this episode does focus mainly on Blade, which of course that's a more episode that I enjoy. Plus, also this episode goes actually into showcasing Whistler in this episode, like their version of Whistler, which is a young Whistler, and so really since we haven't had that technically before, really I think they try to present this Whistler kind of like the Blade movie Whistler. Which like I thought was a decent attempt. I thought was a decent showcasing of a Whistler in the show. Other than that, yeah, like I think that this episode is actually pretty good show, like a pretty good episode overall. We have Krista who is kind of dealing with her mother and her mother's health issues. In this episode, we are to deal with kind of Blade's past coming back to haunt him. Not only Stephen Razor is coming back to haunt him, but also Blade is kind of forced to remember bits and pieces about his past. Guys like Tonka or Taka, or guys like Danny, or guys like Viola, or really even just Blade's supposed father that really Blade is kind of disconnected from, because eventually Blade did just run off and go on his own at some point as a kid. So I really thought that this episode was really good, was really solid. I really did enjoy it. Really, I think overall, I kind of like this just because it's a flashback episode. We really get to have seen that like Blade didn't right away come and have a serum being put into him. Like he had to go through a trial uh, of going into finding a way to consistently give Blade his food source, if that's what we are to say. We also find out in this episode that it seems that animal blood won't do for vampires in this series. So I guess that kind of covers it. Like there's certain other kind of vampire shows that have it be that like they can have like cow blood and be perfectly fine. Well, I guess like in this show, I guess vampires just get sick from animal blood, which I'm like, oh, okay, so that rules that out of just like instead of having the serum, like you could have animal blood, but I guess that doesn't work. It just makes these vampires sick. So, yeah, so really, I kind of went over a bulk of what is to happen in the episode. There is a continuation of kind of Charlotte wanting to know what is going on, and so she's getting this information from Glennis, or God, what is her name? Uh, yeah, Glennis, Glynnis, Glennis. Like I'm trying to figure out the pronunciation because like Charlotte did say her name, but it sounded weird to me. But anyways, so yeah, hopefully I'm gonna be able to freaking know most of these names when eventually it'll pop up in my brain noggin. Because eventually I thought like somewhere that like I was going to have to fall and slip and not remember some name somewhere, so that'll eventually happen. So, also, I guess Blade is also talking to a certain doctor in this episode, and I'll get to that when eventually we get there. More than likely, the details of that part will probably get hazy, just because really I just didn't understand exactly what that doctor was really all and truly there for. So she'll just exist. but I don't remember what for. Like, there's a lot of stuff just going on in this episode. It's very busy. So, speaking of busy, I think it's time to get busy and go into spoilers about this episode. So, obviously, I would say a good, solid thumbs up episode. Like, I wouldn't say that it, like comparing to all the episodes, I would probably say this one is really great compared to all the other ones. Like I still think the favorite that I have is still my favorite, even though I do like this one as well. But anyways, I think it's about that time to get into that coveted double five time territory if I haven't already, and go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time we spoil this episode. So in the very beginning, we are to see Stephen Razor, who is to kill a ex-police officer, and we don't understand why. We're just like, man, this show is goofy. What is it going on? What? Steppenwolf is just killing random people. We don't know why. They tell you why. So, uh, so Blade and Shen are eventually talking to this doctor, Dr. Chang, who I guess evidently will, if she hasn't already, she will eventually be in 2 episodes of this season. So if we see her here, I guess we'll see her again. Like she is uh, helping Blade because uh, Dr. Chang was to try to help them with something, and like they're rushing her for answers, and she's like, dude, it's still not ready yet. Like it's still not ready for me to help. I think it's probably like helping them with the whole like serum thing is what I'm assuming is going on there, but I could be wrong. Because I think Blade was asking for the whole inhaler bit for a very long time, and Shen couldn't figure that out. So I'm assuming that's what like they're going to Dr. Chang for. I could be wrong because I didn't really pay attention to that amidst of all the stuff going on in this episode. So, so I'm gonna cover pretty much all the Blade stuff all in one shot, and then probably the Krista stuff is probably gonna be dumped for the very end, or I might just put a pin in the Blade stuff to cover a lot of the Krista stuff and then get that all out of the way. So that's done. But I kind of want to focus on some pieces so that way I can get them out of the way so I don't feel that I'm going to just be like, and this name is blah, 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 because I'll have been focusing too much on certain information. Plus, I'll also get to the Charlotte stuff. That little bit of thing there that I hate Charlotte, honestly. I think it feels like a waste of time whenever there's a Charlotte scene because a lot of the Charlotte scenes are just her getting updates from people from stuff that happened like probably like 12 episodes ago, and like Charlotte is just hearing about it now. Like I give a rip. Like I don't care that Charlotte is getting closer to maybe understanding what Krista's all about, because it won't come to that. She won't find out. It's gonna be too late. So, anyways, so let's go into the Blade stuff, and then I'll probably just put a pin in it, get into the Krista stuff, then shove into the Charlotte stuff because that is not really important, and then get back into the Blade stuff and finish the episode with the Blade things because I think that's a much more finishing of the episode rather than the Krista stuff. Just because, really, the Krista stuff is the way the episode ends, but I want to end it the Blade way, just because we have freaking Shaft in this episode. Shaft, you bet your bippy that's right. So, freaking the guy who is Shaft. I think his name is Roundtree or something, but like his real name, I think it's like Roundtree. But the guy who played Shaft comes in as Blade's father. Isn't that sweet? You bet your batukus. So, let's get in. Let's go on. So Shen and Blade are just walking in and just like, well, I guess I'm just some kind of detective now that's gonna go and just look through this whole case. And Shen comes in like a CSI guy and is just all of a sudden like putting his fingers in places that probably don't belong. But I guess Shen just looks like he's qualified enough to just willy nilly do whatever. So Shen with Blade is looking this guy up and down, and so this is a guy that is actually familiar to Blade. This is some guy named Danny, and I think his name is Danny. And so this is a ex-cop that Blade knows oh too well. And fortunately, Tony bizarrely in his mouth has a chess piece that Shen is to take out and give to Blade. And Blade is like, "Oh, I know what this is about. Like this is something from my past because evidently Blade used to like to play chess a lot when he was a kid, bizarrely. But anyways, but we'll get to that. So Blade is to go into a flashback immediately after the Tony stuff to showcase that at some point Blade was a kid. Who would have thunk it, right? Yeah, you would have had to. So we see Blade as a young kid who is little man, or Eric Brooks in this case, so we'll call him Eric for this instance of this episode. So Eric Brooks is having his mother consistently giving him a VI of blood consistently. And so Danny is watching them do that. It seems that Eric is to mention that he's a really good healer, uh, but it still like looks like that he's gotten quite a few needles in him, I guess. But anyways, so after they give him the IV of blood, Eric's father goes and like locks like a million different locks on this kid's door, and so eventually they're all going out into the like kitchen slash every other room and like trying to figure out what they're going to do next when this amount of blood like runs out, because it seems that eventually somebody like somebody is kind of finding out that that this blood is going missing, and so uh like both Blade's mother and father, it's like, well, we need to figure some kind of either equivalent or something out. They start coming up with like some ideas of like, well, maybe we should come up with like animal blood and have him like drink that, uh, and Eric's father is like, well, like if anything, we tried giving him cow blood, he just gets sick from that, and so like he needs human blood, like he needs that because there's no other like substitute, like there's nothing else but that. So I'm going to pause here for a second. All right, so really, like Tony, it seems that eventually Tony is the one that seems to have the inside scoop of who exactly could come to help out this family, and eventually that person is Whistler. So, but Blade is to go and get this IV, and I guess the IV isn't good enough. Like, Blade pulls this IV out, rips the bag of blood, and starts just consuming it that way and getting a huge amount of it, and then wiping his face off of blood. So, eventually, Blade is to go and play chess with this guy called Taka, and like it seems like it sounds consistently different when anyone is to pronounce this guy's name. But I looked at IMDb and it said Taka, so I'm gonna go with that. If it's like Tanaka or if it's Mikanka, or if it sounds something like, if it sounds incorrect, like I IMDb'd it and it said Taka, so like I guess that's correct. So Blade and Tonka are to go and play chess together, and like Tonka is beating Eric in chess. So Blade's father is to tell Eric that like, hey, like it's time for you to go. Like it's time, like it's getting like time for you to go. So Blade eventually is to bust out his fangs to his father, I guess because he's just angry. And so uh eventually Eric doesn't exactly know why exactly he did that, but so he goes off, and uh so eventually they go and they are to, like, after giving Blade his blood, they eventually start to, like, concrete slabs, like, chain him down to these concrete slabs and like cage his room up so that way he won't escape or anything like that after he has his blood. So uh Eric's parents are to speak to Whistler, and Whistler is to mention that uh that of course Eric is unique, that he's a daywalker and he has all their strengths and other weaknesses, the classic thing that you have to say about Blade. So Whistler is to mention to these people that it's like, well, like we can either have one or two things done. We can kill him right here now and have this all be over, or we can take Eric and bring him into a war that is already upon us. Have him be uh, the person who is to fight against this threat and be able to easily win compared to anyone else. So Eric is kind of hearing out of the crack of his door all of what Whistler is saying. And so Eric, not wanting to, I guess, be a part of some war or be uh, some machine being put out there to kill at numerous times over, Eric decides he's going to basically break his hand to get out of these handcuffs that he was in, to try to get out of his room and escape, and he does. Eventually leading uh, Eric to eventually go to Tonka's grocery spot, where Eric is to eventually go back to the back of this spot, kind of looking at some like samurai blades or some just uh, uh, like katana or something like equipment. And so all of a sudden, eventually, Blade is to eventually notice that Tonka is getting robbed by two men. So Eric goes, I'm going to say Eric or Blade intermittently, but people will know what I mean. So Eric is to eventually go and grab one of these men and suck his blood and kill this guy, and then the other, or almost kill that guy, and then Eric goes and stabs the other guy in the throat, eventually killing him. So Tonka kind of freaks out about all this, but then eventually Eric's father comes into the fray, seeing what Eric had done, and like Eric is kind of telling his father that he's just kind of done with him, like he's just kind of done with like what he's been doing, and so like Eric is just going to eventually just run away from his family, and like Whistler almost goes for his gun, but eventually Eric kind of like uh, breaks Whistler's leg, which eventually has Whistler like not shoot Eric. And one of the thugs, before they are to die, shoots Eric's father in the chest to bring him down. So Viola, which I think is like Blade's stepmother, eventually tries to like protect or try to uh, kind of like press the bleeding of Eric's father, and Eric is to just run off and not be seen by his family again. So I think that covers a bulk of a thing where I can kind of go into a pin and then cover some of the Krista and Charlotte stuff. Because that was a pretty decent amount of stuff that I kind of had to cover. So let's put a pin in that. Let's get to the Krista stuff. So, uh, as you may have remembered, it seems that Krista's mother is going through, I guess, some kind of cancer that I guess is at stage 4. Krista is to be seen rushing to her mother's bedside while there are some doctors that are going to try to perform certain procedures. Because it seems that Krista's mother doesn't want to leave her home. If she's going to die, she's going to die in her home. And so, uh, both Pat and like Pat is the guy that had talked to her in previous episodes. So Pat is going with Krista off to the side and just saying like, well, you know what? Like if she's gonna go, like she should probably go like this, like at her home and like peaceful and whatever. And like Krista's like, no, like I don't want her to just easily just unravel like this. Like if anything, like she should be fighting to stay alive instead of just fizzling out like this. Really, like Krista is at a point where she just wants like her mother to like continue on technically living. And so Krista is to go to some doctor at the House of Chthon and have her kind of be checked about her injuries. Like it seems that also we find out that Krista's hand, like I guess, had gotten chopped off, and I guess it is uh, like regenerating, and it's to the point where most of the hand it has been there, but it's just like the skin needs to be attached to it. So Chris is talking to this doctor, and and the doctor is reminding her of every single weakness that vampires have, I guess. Because if we didn't know any of this before, like we have to be reminded now, and if we've ever seen a Blade thing, or if we've ever seen any vampire movie ever, because I guess after 8 episodes, we're still dumb about the whole vampire thing because we've never heard of vampires before. Again, with this being the 8th episode now. But, I guess we didn't do any research or Google anything about vampires any time in our lives when we've probably seen a number of, at least one Wesley Snipe movie, probably, right? Before we got into this one. Maybe 2, maybe 85 of them. How many like more are they going to make now when there's going to be another Blade movie coming sometime soon? To probably a streaming service near you, forcibly at this point. So, uh, so going for Krista. So Krista is hearing from this doctor that there have been numerous different cases where like people have been completely like to the point of having a wheelchair to be able to walk, and then they become a vampire and they get cured of all of that to where they can actually walk, they can actually whatever. That's why a lot of familiars are so tempted to want to be a vampire, just so that way they can regain the ability to do any number of things that they couldn't before because they're not vampire. So Chris is like, well, yeah, so even illnesses, like people could be cured of illnesses, and you could probably expect where that is going. Because evidently Krista had never watched the movie Twilight, where evidently Edward, and I don't know why I'm even saying this because Twilight reference, Edward bizarrely was sick, and so all of a sudden he was turned into vampire by the guy who was his weird father, and like Edward in that movie was sick. Uh, the guy who sired him, I don't remember what his name is because I can barely remember who any of these people were. I know Kellen Lutz was in that movie, but anybody else? MacGyver, Jacob, something, whatever, anybody. But yeah, Edward was sick in that film, and then he vampired, and then he was perfectly fine. He probably had diverticulitis or something. I don't care what he had. He probably had a crystallitis disease. I don't know what he had. I don't remember. I don't remember much about that movie besides Edward and Jacob, because they made a whole deal about that. Maybe I'll watch the Twilight movies if people really want to have you watch them, but I hope those views get really high to justify me watching those. So let's move on. So Krista is seeing her mother suffer, and so Krista is just so tempted to just be like, you know what? I want to make my mother a vampire because that seems like the best thing to do, right? Because her mother is almost at like the end of her life, and why not just give Chris's mother everlasting life? Because that seems like a good decision, right? Just don't do it. She's like, like I get it's her mother, but still, like, you're gonna have your mother basically turn into one of you, and like Krista would say, like she doesn't feel quite human, and you would think Krista would just be like, no, like I'm not gonna try and turn more people. Even it does, yeah, it's sad that it's her mother, but still, like Krista should know what it's like to, but it is what it is. So, Krista is to eventually be on her mother's deathbed, and she is going to, I guess, turn her mother into a vampire. She's going to give her serum at some point, but so Krista is going and biting her mother on the arm, and then is going to give her like serum eventually, but instead, I guess Krista thought that it was a mistake to try to do that, and so Krista tries to like put a pillow over Mother's head and kill her off. Like so, I'm wondering if like her mother still gets turned or not because like I'm just trying to figure out or remember if her mother actually gets turned, and if her mother does get turned, like bad decision. So let's get to the Charlotte stuff because there's a whole reason for that. So Charlotte is to eventually talk to uh, Glennison or Glennis, sure. And Glennis is to tell her about all the information that happened from episode pilot 1 to now, I guess, basically. All information that really doesn't matter to us, but it's just an update for her because she's like 4 episodes behind and she needs to get an update because why does she even need to like, hey, I don't even need to watch the recaps. Like, I just need to come on here and they'll tell me what's going on in the show. And I'll just be like, oh, wow, that's great. That's great. So, Glennis is trying to, like, watch over certain people of this house, watching over Marcus. watching over Krista, and it seems that Glennis is like there is something that Glennis thinks that Krista, like, there's something off about her, but she can't exactly pinpoint what it is. Like, it seems like she sticks out like a sore thumb compared to everyone else. And so Charlotte is like, well, like, I need you to go and figure that out. Why is she different like everyone else? So she's special. I don't know. So now going into Krista giving a pillow to her mother, sadly enough, I'm not going to say it's not sad. I'm not going to say that this isn't a sad part of what Krista ended up doing. But Glennis is to appear and puka like some kind of vampire magic behind Krista while she's giving her mother the pillow. And Glennis is like, well, hey, how is it that all of a sudden you have a bag of serum? Like as if you're a part of the Blade community, huh? Are we going to talk about this? How all of a sudden all you have all this serum all of a sudden? And so Krista gets her fangs out, and now we're assuming it's going to be a vampire versus vampire fight. And then all of a sudden, bizarrely, like Ray Collins just busts in, and he's just like, hey, vampire ladies, how's it going? Could I do some investigation? And then all of a sudden, both these girls show that they're vampires, and Ray Collins is like, oh crap. And like, that's how the episode ends, but I'm not going to end the review like that. Because Ray Collins was going and talking to Pat at his butcher shop and like asking him information about his family, and eventually kind of going on to ask about Krista. And Pat is to mention that eventually, like Krista doesn't seem like very attached to this family. It seems like she's going and tying herself to Marcus Van Sciver lately. And like this guy is the answer to Donald Trump, I guess, Marcus Van Sciver, because it seems like he has tons and tons of money. So let's get back into Blade stuff, because that's a pretty cool little bit of things. So, like I will remember people, remember people. That doesn't make any sense. Like, as I will remind people of what had happened. So, Blade found Donnie, a ex-detective, dead. Which Donnie was or Danny was the guy who had gotten Whistler, and so then eventually Blade is to eventually see Taka, who is also dead, and then and all done by Stephen Razor. And so there is a third friend of Blade's that is to be Viola, which was the nurse from the flashbacks. And so Blade is gonna run to get to her, and he saves her just as she was going to almost die. Grab her out of some water bath thing and like try to do CPR, and she coughs up all the water, and so Viola is to tell Eric, or to tell Blade, because he's Blade now. Yeah, Blade, like your father had come back. Like your, not your biological father, like his, like father from flashbacks. He's back in town because Blade is here. So Blade is like, oh my god, my father is like I thought my father had left and died. And Viola's like, no, like your father is here. You can see him. So Blade is to eventually try and find his father, but that leads him to Steppenrazor, where both Steppenrazor and Blade fight it out, and it like this fight sequence is like really cool. There's like a lot of like there seems to be some more like powerhouse kind of moves where it kind of feels like people are getting flung, and I kind of like that, where it seems like much more like aggressive kind of fighting. compared to some of the other fights, which is just like kick, kick, punch, punch. And I'm like, eh. Or a lot of times, like, a lot of it is just Blade just easily after one or two things just killing somebody, and it kind of gets boring after a while. But this fight I actually liked because it was long and drawn out. And I'm like, oh, thank God! Like, at least it was finally a fight sequence because Blade kills people too quickly. But anyways, with the exclusion of like pilot episode where he's fighting that like Russian like soldier, there was kind of a fight sequence there. It's kind of a little bit of a kind of a little bit. Anyways, moving on. So Seppen is to fight Blade, and this is to end with Blade's father stepping in on taking Blade's sword and thrusting it through Blade to hit Steppen, and Steppen dies. And then Blade's father takes the blade out of Blade. Blade out of Blade, see where I went there? And then so Blade's dad is to mention like, hey son, I'm back. Like, I'm here. And really, Blade is like, well, you know what, that's great and all, but if anything, in all honesty, you were just the guy holding the bag. Like, yeah, like, it's great that you felt like you accomplished something and bop, but you know what? Like, you're not really my father. Like, you're not my definitely biological father, so you're just not my father. Yeah, you probably took care of me for a certain amount of time, but then I left you. Then I ran out on you, and then just went on my own. So, kind of like they could have had some closure here, but instead Blade just decided to just disown this guy. Like, Blade has kind of just been on his own for so long. Like, I think almost like Whistler has been much closer to being Blade's father than anybody else has besides his biological one. And so, like, because Whistler had been there for Blade for however long until whichever movie that they decided to actually kill him off in. The second one? Did he die in the second one? The third one? Did he die in all of them? Did he just die consistently in every single one of them? Seemed like to me. It seemed like they couldn't exactly confirm when he died, because it seemed like every single one of those Blade movies, I'm like, is Whistler dead? Are they just corpsing him out? He did actually die legitimately in the third one. Like, they blew him up in, I think, the third one. And then eventually, like, Whistler's, like, daughter came in and became new Whistler, but still. Like, I think they killed him in, like, every single one of those movies. I think in, like, the second one, like, he was, like, a vampire or something. And then I think they, like, cured him of his vampirism. Or it was some, like, there is some goofy things going on in Blade 2. That feels obvious, but anyways. But yeah, so I'm going to call this one a wrap. I don't remember how exactly Tonka had died, but he died because they confirmed that towards the very tail end of the episode. But Blade's dad also asked about like Viola, and Blade's like, no, she's still alive. So, like, hopefully it stays that way, because Steppen Razor is dead, so who's going to come after anybody now? Nobody. So with that said, that's it. I'm going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.